Welcome everyone to a new Exo Heroes Spotlight. Today we're going to be talking about Shufraken, the king of North Von Frosty. So a quick overview. Shufraken is a really strong hero in his own right. He's got sustain, AoE damage, AoE CC, but when you pair him with Romka or Valentina, he just becomes even stronger, more versatile, with the option to specialize in either damage or CC aspects of his kit. So as you can see here, his hero tier faded, he has a darkness element, his position is defense, he'll be in the front row, and his attack type is physical. And now, why don't we leave it to Hal and take it away with the skills?
Alright, let's take a look at what Shufraken has to offer. So obviously he's got a basic attack, it's pretty straightforward like every other champion. Does about 435 damage to 522, it's alright. Right, then let's take a look at his A1. So his A1 is King's Spirit. And what this does is it grants heal over time to himself, which heals at 50% of his missing health every turn for 4 turns. So that is actually quite a lot of healing. It's based off his missing health, which means the lower his health is going to be, the more he's going to heal. And his A2, which is Marching Sword. So what it does is, it's a back row focused AoE attack that deals 210% damage to all back row enemies, and it inflicts target with freeze for 7 turns, which is quite a long turn, right? That's almost a whole round. And it deals about 150% additional damage for each self-harm stack the target has. And we'll talk a little bit about, how the self-harm stack works and why he's so good with his synergies with essentially his kids, Romka and Valentina. So we'll take a look at that. And lastly, his passive is Thrust 3. It deals damage 30% and inflicts stun to the attacker upon taking damage for 5 turns. That's a decent amount of stun. Gain 1 mana if the target health is 80% or more, removes 1 mana from the target, and then gain a mana if your target health is lower than 30%. So that's pretty good. Breath of Mana, it gives permanent 1 mana to all the front row allies. So that's very useful. Very similar to, I think, a champion like Garth. You can really pair with other front row allies and spam out a lot of skills if they also have very low mana requirement when it comes to their skills. So it's pretty useful. And then lastly, he has the unique passive of Fear of the Beast. And what it does is it adds Fear of the Beast mark to any enemy with defense lower than you. So given the fact that he's a defense champion, there are going to be a lot of champions that has lower defense than him. And what it does is if the target has 10% or less health at the end of the turn, it deals 65% damage to all enemies in the same row. So that's very useful when you have a low health target, especially in the back row. And essentially you can trigger this passive and either take them out straight up or continue to weaken other back row threats of your opponent. So overall, it's a very strong kit and it offers a lot in terms of a little bit of CC, a little bit of damage. Right, so given everything we've seen here, he really does a lot of damage and brings good utility just on himself. But once he's paired up with another champion like Romka and Valentina, it brings even more damage and utility to his kit. So with that being said, let's take a look at how we can use him both as a standalone champion, as well as how to really maximize his true potential with synergies with Romka and Valentina.
So the first thing I want to talk about is his Thrust 3 passive, which has a small counterattack and a 5-turn stun. And what this does is it kind of deters attackers. When combined with his A1 that gives him healing based on missing health, it just makes him very difficult to deal with because you don't want to attack him unless you could really burst him down. And because of this, it leaves him open to A2 your backline slowly over the course of the fight. And his defense may not be the highest among Fated defenders, but he does have strong sustain, and due to the CC in his kit, the AoE CC, he's going to be a lot more useful when the enemies are more threatening, which sort of gives him this innate scaling as you ramp up in opponent difficulty.
So those are good points. But with that being said, let's take a look at how to really maximize his potential. So let's talk a little bit about the backstory of who Shufraken is. He's essentially the king of North Von Frosty, right? And he's got 2 kids, Valentina and Romka. And he synergized really well with them, and we'll talk about that. So let's take a quick look at how the synergy actually takes place. So with Romka, if we look at his marching sword ability, so his A2, this has a status effect attached to it, which is afflict target with freeze for 7 turns, okay. But it also deals 150% additional damage for each self-harm stack the target has. And what Romka offers is, Romka allows him to stack those self-harm with one of his skills. So let's take a quick look. So as we can see here, Romka has a couple of skills that allows him to stack self-harm status on the opponent. So first skill, let's take a look at his A1. So his first skill, Touch of Darkness, it deals 225% damage to one enemy. Afflicts target with Nullify Heal for 12 turns. It's all good, but it's really the third passive, Self-Harm. Afflicts target with Self-Harm if target is afflicted with the Fear of Abyss mark, and dealing 45% damage every turn for 5 turns. And we know that as long as Shufraken is in the game, he's going to apply the Fear of the Beast mark to everyone who has lower defense than Shufraken. So there's going to be a lot of champion, especially against a very backline heavy team comp. Essentially the entire backline is going to have the Fear of the Beast. And Romka can go in and start stacking these self-harm stacks. Same goes with his A2, right? So this one is even better because it's an AoE attack, which means he can start applying this to multiple targets at the same time. So when Romka's self-harm stack is applied in combination with Shufraken's marching sword ability here, it becomes a huge threat to the enemy's backline. We can start doing a lot of damage, especially if you have multiple self-harm stacks on a single target. That can go up to 300% additional damage or potentially 450% additional damage depending on the opponent's team speed. So it's really a huge attack amplifier and essentially brings Shufraken from a very frontline tanky champion to a bruiser who poses incredible threat to your backline. So one thing worth pointing out is that although on paper there's the potential of having multiple self-harm stacks on a single target, but Romka is not a very fast champion. So he's actually one of the slower ones in the game. So the potential of you really stacking, having more than one stack of self-harm is actually quite low. But, with that being said, doing additional damage of 150% to all the backline squishy champions is still very good. I think the combination of Romka and Shufraken really allows Shufraken to become this threat. Not only is he going to be a tanky utility champion, but at the same time, he's a real threat to anyone's backline, especially in PvP setting. So now let's take a look at another synergies that Shufraken has, and this time with his other kid Valentina. So what Shufraken and Valentina has in common is the ability to trigger Valentina's special skill, Contempt. So if we look at Valentina's skill, A1, very simple skill, does 100%, 150% damage to one enemy, afflicts frostbite to the target, dealing 92% damage every turn for 2 turns. Okay, but it's the third element of this skill, Contempt, that's really interesting, because it applies mana burn, 10 mana, if the target is afflicted with Fear of the Beast. So again, all the backline champions of the opponent's team are probably going to have the Fear of the Beast. And 10 mana is a lot. So what this really allows her to do is to kind of focusing on one single threat in the backline of the opponent's team, and essentially making sure that that champion does not use any skills throughout the entire fight, essentially nullifying a major threat completely. And that's very strong. Similarly, if you look at his A2, Cage of Despair, very similar. This one does a little bit more damage, has the status effect, silence here as well. But at the same time, you also got a mana burn, 10 mana on the target that is afflicted with Fear of the Beast. So the combination of Shufraken and Valentina is one that's probably more effective, especially if the opponent's team has a single target that you really want to nullify. Because both of Valentina's skills are essentially single target. But what it allows you to do is really focus down one target, making sure that that target does not become a threat to your team, while the rest of your team can slowly work your way through the other opponent's heroes. So with that being said, I think both synergy with Romka and Valentina is good, but probably there are more situations where we can utilize the synergy with Romka a little bit more. But nonetheless, I think the synergy with Valentina, especially in PvP situations, is definitely one that can be used very effectively as well. But with that being said, one other thing we want to touch on is that Shufraken does have a Fate Core counterpart. So let's take a look at what the Fate Core brings.
Alright, so Fate Core Shufraken, his abilities A1 and A2 are essentially the same, but he does come with two new parts to his passive. The first being Harbinger of Awakening, which afflicts Mark of Revenge to an enemy that killed an ally. And this buff is removed when the target with Mark of Revenge is either killed or damaged by somebody with Harbinger of Awakening, which is this passive, and activates the awakening effects of all allies with the awakening skill. The awakening skill being the second part of his new Fate Core passive, which is Awakening Dragon Emperor. It increases the mana obtained in Shufraken's turn by 1 per fallen ally on its turn. So being a defender hero, whenever Shufraken is attacked, normally he would gain 1 mana. But if he has 2 allies that have fallen, he'll gain 3 mana instead. And the special is if his health drops below 30%, it increases his attack speed by 25 and grants damage immunity to him for 4 turns. And essentially what this does is just, due to the damage immunity, provides him another round to exercise one of his skills. Either it's Sustain, or if you're really close to winning a battle, you could use his A2 to CC the backline or do some damage. It really just gives him another opportunity when he's low to be a little bit offensive. Now, overall, I think Shufraken is visually a really cool character. I love the floating swords on his back. His Fate Core also looks amazing. And I think one of the most interesting things about him is the fact that they've tied in his synergies and made him so much stronger and maximizing his potential when he is paired with Romka and Valentina, as we talked about earlier in the video. The fact that, they're heir to the throne, naturally, they have some of their father's tendencies and work a little bit better with him. Shout out to the developers again for the cool story tie-ins. And that's it for us today. If you have a different take on Shufraken, please let us know in the comments. To see more reviews of Exo Heroes, feel free to check out our other content and playthroughs. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys next time.